Beneath the quiet hum of modern cities, beneath the pulse of glass towers and winding roads, there lies an echo, faint, but unbroken. It moves unseen through our streets, our languages, our laws. It whispers in the marble columns that frame our courthouses, in the arches of our bridges, in the calendar that rules our days. It is the echo of a civilization that refused to fade, the Roman Empire. For more than 1,000 years, Rome dreamed louder than any empire before or after. Its armies carved borders that shaped continents, its architects molded stone into poetry, its thinkers turned order into virtue, and its rulers tried to make time itself bow. But Rome was more than conquest, it was an idea. And that idea, long after the empire fell, became the foundation of the modern world. Tonight, we journey into that memory, into the rise, the reign, the ruin, and the quiet endurance of Rome's dream. We will walk her marble streets, hear her voices, and feel her legacy moving softly beneath the skin of our world. If these words carry you closer to rest, let this channel stay by your side too. For even as the world sleeps, history still whispers. Chapter 1, The Birth of Eternal Rome. In the beginning, there was only silence, the kind of silence that lies between earth and sky before memory learns to speak. The hills of Latium slept beneath the soft breath of the Tiber River, and somewhere within that whisper, destiny stirred. 2 children, carried by the river's arms, drifted toward legend. Romulus and Remus, the twins who would turn myth into stone. Raised by a she-wolf in a wild valley, they learned to survive before they learned to dream. The creature who nursed them carried in her gaze both prophecy and sorrow, as if she knew the empire her children would build would honor the gods and defy them all the same. As they grew, their visions diverged. Remus saw peace. Romulus saw glory. And when brother turned against brother, Rome's first tragedy was written. When Remus fell, innocence fell with him. Romulus, both mournful and determined, built a city upon the blood of that loss, a city he named for himself, but one that would belong to the world. The first stones upon Palatine Hill were humble, a few walls, a few fires. But within them burned something eternal. Rome was not born in splendor, but in belief, the quiet conviction that from humble beginnings, eternity could rise. Kings ruled her early years, Romulus the founder, Numa the priest, Tullus the warrior. Yet even as crowns changed hands, the people began to dream of a power that no single man could hold. They longed for something higher than monarchy, a republic of voices. So when Tarquin the Proud ruled too long and too cruelly, the people rose. The last king was cast out. The monarchy fell. Rome stood at the edge of a new dawn. Out of myth and blood, the republic was born. And so, as the night deepened over the Tiber, Rome took its first true breath, no longer a story whispered by gods, but a voice that would one day echo across the world. Chapter 2, The Republic and the Dream of Freedom. The Republic began not in celebration, but in careful hope. Men gathered in the open air of the Forum, their voices rising like morning birds. For the first time, the fate of Rome was decided not by a king, but by its citizens. Here, law became the new crown. Senators debated beneath the marble sun, crafting rules that would outlive them. Magistrates were chosen, councils elected, checks placed upon power. Freedom, the Romans believed, was not the absence of rule, but the sharing of it. Discipline became their virtue, order their strength. But the republic was human, flawed and full of contradiction. The rich grew richer, the poor hungrier. The patricians ruled the Senate, while the plebeians toiled in the fields. Yet, even through the struggles, Rome endured, because its people believed in the rhythm of reform, in the idea that justice could be shaped like stone, slowly, but forever. Then came the wars, first against neighbors, then across seas. Carthage stood in Rome's way, proud and defiant. The Punic Wars raged for generations. When they ended, Carthage was gone, its ashes scattered to the wind. Rome stood unrivaled. But power, once tasted, never releases its hold. Wealth flooded the republic. Gold glimmered in the streets, and corruption soon followed. Senators schemed, generals grew bold. Men like Sulla and Pompey and Crassus turned armies into instruments of ambition. And from their shadow rose Julius Caesar, a man too brilliant, too beloved, too dangerous for the old republic to contain. His victories brought glory, but his ambition brought fear. When he crossed the Rubicon, the republic trembled. Rome had birthed a leader it could no longer control. And so, as daggers flashed beneath the marble dome, the dream of liberty bled into silence. The republic, like its last breath, lingered only for a moment. What followed would be something the world had never seen before, an empire of gold and fire. Chapter 3, Empire of Gold and Fire. Out of chaos came order. Out of blood, peace. Octavian, Caesar's heir, rose from the ashes of war. With patience and quiet calculation, he brought Rome under his will, not as king, but as Augustus, the first citizen. The republic was gone, but Augustus gave the illusion that it lived on. The Senate still met, but its words were hollow. Rome had traded freedom for stability, and in doing so, found its golden age. The Pax Romana spread across the world like a calm wind. Roads stretched like veins from the heart of Rome to the edges of the earth. Cities gleamed in marble. Art, literature, and law flourished. The empire's reach was vast, its confidence unshakable. But beneath the splendor, the seeds of its decline had already been sown. Wealth gathered in the hands of few. The common people lived on bread and spectacle, lulled into silence by the grandeur that surrounded them. Still, Rome's beauty was unmatched. The Colosseum rose like a crown of stone, where cheers and sorrow became one voice. Poets wrote of love and death. Sculptors turned flesh into eternity. Philosophers pondered duty and virtue beneath torchlight. The emperors who followed wore power like fragile armor. Some were wise, Trajan, Hadrian, Marcus Aurelius, men who tried to rule with reason. Others were cruel, Nero, Caligula, driven by fear, vanity, or madness. Yet through it all, the empire endured. For centuries, Rome's light burned bright, but fire, even when eternal, consumes itself. And in that slow dimming, a quiet truth began to emerge: the empire that had conquered the world was being conquered by time. Chapter 4, The Fall and the Fractured World. Night settled over the empire like a slow-moving shadow, soft at first, almost gentle, like a reminder that even the brightest flames must dim. For centuries, Rome had risen, stretching its arms across deserts, mountains, and seas. Its roads ran like the veins of a living creature, pulsing with trade, ideas, and ambition. Its cities glowed beneath torchlight, and its legions marched with the certainty of gods. And yet, as time pressed onward, something delicate began to shift beneath the marble surface, a quiet unraveling, barely visible, but endlessly patient. The first cracks were not sudden. They appeared like hairline fractures in old stone, subtle enough to overlook. The empire had grown vast, too vast for any one mind to understand, too complex for any one system to guide. Communications stretched across months. Armies stationed at distant frontiers became isolated, forgotten. Emperors rose and fell with dizzying speed, their reigns lasting years, months, sometimes only days. The throne became a revolving door of ambition and fear, a crown poisoned not by gold, but by expectation. In the north, beyond the frozen rivers and thick forests, new peoples stirred: the Goths, the Vandals, the Franks. They watched Rome not with awe, but with hunger and curiosity. The empire they had once feared now seemed uncertain, its confidence frayed. To them, Rome was no longer a godlike force, but a distant giant stumbling in the dark. Still, they admired it. They sought its knowledge, its wealth, its order. They wanted to live within its world, even as they prepared to test its border. Inside the empire, wealth pooled in the hands of a few, leaving hollow spaces where once vibrant communities had stood. The countryside emptied, villages crumbling as people flooded toward cities in search of bread and spectacle. Gladiator games, once rare, became constant, a desperate attempt to distract the masses from rising taxes, corrupt officials, and uncertain futures. Bread was thrown to the crowds as if peace could be fed into existence. But no empire can silence its fractures with entertainment forever. And yet, despite the growing imbalance, Rome remained beautiful. It still shimmered beneath dawn's first light, when the sun kissed the domes and rooftops, turning stone into gold. It still breathed wisdom in its libraries, where scholars whispered secrets of the ancient world. It still echoed with prayers in its temples and laughter in its markets. There were moments when it seemed as if the empire could continue forever, moments when one could walk along the Tiber at sunset and believe time itself paused in admiration. But beauty does not stop destiny. And destiny, though silent, moves steadily. One of the most profound changes came not from the sword, but from the spirit. Christianity, once a hidden faith whispered in catacombs, began to rise. Its message of hope, equality, and eternal life wove itself into the hearts of soldiers, mothers, slaves, philosophers. The empire, sensing the shift, embraced it, first cautiously, then wholeheartedly. Temples that once honored Jupiter and Mars dimmed their fires, while churches rose beside them like newborn stars. This transformation brought unity but also conflict. Traditions clashed. Identities shifted. Old gods fell quiet, and new rituals shaped the rhythm of life. Rome's soul was changing, and with change came uncertainty. The empire was no longer the same Rome that had conquered the world, it was becoming something softer, more spiritual, yet more vulnerable. Meanwhile, the eastern half of the empire flourished. Constantinople, crowned by golden domes, became a beacon of wealth, art, and defense. Its walls were thick, its rulers cunning, its culture rich. The East had the advantage of geography, wealth, and stability. The West, burdened by invasions, economic decline, and political chaos, grew fragile. And then, the unimaginable happened. In the year 410, under a moon that glowed pale and indifferent, the Visigoth king Alaric entered Rome. For the first time in 800 years, the eternal city, the heart of the world, was broken. People spoke of silence hanging in the streets like a veil. Of statues toppled. Of temples emptied. Of firelight dancing in the darkness where laughter once echoed. Mothers held their children close as memories turned to ash. But even as grief consumed the city, Rome refused to surrender. It had fallen, yes, but it had fallen before, and risen stronger. Citizens rebuilt. Prayers filled the air once more. Scholars returned to their studies. Markets cautiously reopened. The spirit of Rome still flickered, steady as a candle clinging to wick. But time is a patient conqueror, and it had not finished its work. Over the next decades, new waves came, Vandals from across the sea, Huns thundering across plains, warriors who carried both fear and fascination for the empire they sought to enter. Some came as attackers. Others came as refugees. Many came simply seeking a place within Rome's story. In 476, the final breath of the Western Empire slipped quietly into history. Romulus Augustus, the last emperor, was deposed, a boy king fading before a world too vast for him to guide. No great explosion marked the moment, no dramatic roar. The fall of Rome was not a collapse, but a tender unthreading, slow, melancholic, inevitable. And yet, paradoxically, Rome did not disappear. Its eastern half, the Byzantine Empire, continued for another 1,000 years. Its laws lived in manuscripts. Its language lived in churches. Its ideas lived in the minds of scholars who preserved its wisdom through war, disease, and darkness. Rome fell, but its story continued. Its ruins whispered. Its memory endured. And from those ruins, a fractured world would slowly rise, medieval, uncertain, searching for meaning. A world built on pieces of Rome, scattered yet eternal. For the empire, though broken, had planted seeds, seeds of faith, law, architecture, philosophy, and identity. Seeds that would one day grow into nations, languages, governments, and dreams. A world shaped by a fallen giant. A future born from a fading past. A civilization transformed into legacy. And as the Tiber continued to flow through the darkened city, the stars above watched quietly, as they had watched centuries before, as Rome became not an empire, but an echo. Chapter 5, The Eternal Legacy. Night has a way of softening the world, of pulling its edges inward until everything becomes quiet, intimate, familiar. And as the last embers of the Roman Empire faded into that long night, the world did not collapse, it simply changed, slowly, quietly, like a great beast falling asleep. Rome's fall, as historians often call it, was not an ending. It was a transformation. A shedding of skin. A drifting from one shape into another. And in that drifting, Rome became something far more enduring than empire, it became memory. Memory survives where walls crumble. Memory thrives where armies fail. Memory endures where time wins. When the Western Empire breathed its last in 476 AD, Europe looked around and found itself standing in the shadow of a world that had once been whole. The statues of emperors remained, worn but proud. The roads remained, stretching across hills and valleys like the veins of an ancient, sleeping god. The aqueducts still carried water. The laws still carried order. The languages still carried rhythm. Rome was gone, and yet Rome was everywhere. In the quiet centuries that followed, the world often felt fractured, kingdoms rising and falling like waves, cities rebuilding and burning, cultures meeting in conflict and in kinship. But even in those uncertain times, people kept turning back to Rome, again and again, as though seeking guidance from an elder whose voice had shaped the world. Monks in distant monasteries copied Roman manuscripts by candlelight, preserving not just words but wisdom. Farmers followed the rhythm of Roman calendars. Kings modeled their courts after imperial traditions. And across vast lands, people walked across stones laid by Roman hands, unaware that every step echoed a story centuries old. Rome lived within architecture. It lived within language. It lived within the laws people swore to uphold. And more than anything, it lived within the imagination, the belief that order could arise from chaos, that beauty could be carved from stone, that humanity could reach beyond itself. The first place Rome's legacy took deep root was within the walls of the church. As faith spread across Europe, Christianity carried with it echoes of the empire that had once tried to silence it. Latin became the language of prayer and scripture. Roman basilicas became the blueprint for churches. Bishops wore garments reminiscent of senators. Even the structure of the church mirrored the structure of the empire: hierarchy, unity, discipline, a sense of the eternal. It is a beautiful irony that the empire that once persecuted Christians became the foundation upon which Christianity built its global reach. The message of faith survived because Rome had built roads, had connected distant lands, had fostered literacy, had created an administrative structure that could be adapted rather than destroyed. In this way, Rome extended its life through the very faith that replaced its old gods. Yet faith was not the only vessel that carried Rome forward. Law, perhaps more than anything, became Rome's true inheritance. Roman law, rooted in reason, debate, fairness, and precedent, became the backbone of legal systems across Europe. In dusty chambers and candlelit courts, judges quoted principles older than their kingdoms. Let the punishment fit the crime. Innocent until proven guilty. Equality under the law. These ideas, now taken for granted, were born beneath the marble columns of ancient Rome. And as centuries passed, Rome's influence continued to ripple outward. Its cities, Paris, London, Vienna, grew upon Roman foundations. Streets followed Roman plans. Fortresses were built upon Roman ruins. In many places, entire medieval towns rose from the skeletons of Roman settlements, like vines finding new life in old stone. Its language, Latin, survived not as a spoken tongue, but as the mother of many. Italian sang with Rome's cadence. Spanish carried its warmth. French held its elegance. Portuguese flowed with its rhythm. Romanian echoed its ancient structure. Even English, though Germanic at its root, borrowed heavily from Latin, especially through law, medicine, philosophy, and the church. Rome lived in words the way fire lives in embers. Its architecture became the dream of every builder who longed for beauty and endurance. Long after Rome's engineers had laid down their tools, their arches and domes continued to rise, in cathedrals, in palaces, in monuments that pierced the sky not out of arrogance, but out of reverence. When the Renaissance dawned, like sunrise after 1,000-year winter, it was Rome that guided the light. Artists, scholars, and architects returned to ancient manuscripts, searching for inspiration. They studied Roman ruins as though they were sacred texts. Michelangelo sculpted marble bodies with the strength of Roman heroes. Leonardo da Vinci sketched machines inspired by Roman engineering. Philosophers rediscovered Cicero. Poets whispered the lines of Virgil. The Renaissance was not merely a rebirth of art, it was a rebirth of Rome. And as Europe entered the age of exploration, Roman ideas traveled across oceans. When settlers built new cities, they carried Roman principles with them: republicanism, civic duty, engineering, urban planning, philosophy, legal frameworks. From the hills of Italy to the shores of the Americas, Rome's influence expanded long after its legions had disappeared. But perhaps Rome's greatest legacy is the idea of the republic itself, the belief that power should be shared, that citizens should serve their society, that government is a responsibility, not a privilege. Though Rome's own republic failed, its spirit survived in the minds of thinkers who shaped modern nations. The founders of many countries looked to Rome as a model: its senate, its checks and balances, its commitment to civic duty. Rome lived in democracy. Rome lived in liberty. Rome lived in the belief that people could rule themselves. It is a quiet wonder that a civilization built on conquest became a teacher of peace, of law, of reason, of unity. Rome was not perfect, no human creation ever is. It knew brutality, oppression, greed, and ambition. But it also knew wisdom, innovation, and vision. And it is this mixture, this humanity, that allowed its legacy to endure. As centuries turned, the world changed again and again. Empires rose and fell. Wars reshaped borders. New inventions rewrote the rhythms of life. But through every shift, Rome remained a constant presence, an invisible architecture beneath the visible world. Even today, we walk through echoes of its existence. We speak in languages shaped by Latin. We study in universities modeled after Roman institutions. We follow laws rooted in Roman codes. We live in cities shaped by Roman planning. We dream in symbols shaped by Roman imagination. Rome is not gone, it has simply become intertwined with what it means to be human. In many ways, Rome is not a place anymore. It is a memory, a framework, a set of ideas, a whisper woven into the fabric of civilization. When a bridge arches gracefully across a river, Rome is there. When a courtroom deliberates justice, Rome is there. When a child studies history, Rome is there. When a poet writes of love, of war, of beauty and sorrow, Rome is there. History is often described as a river. Rome is one of its deepest currents, steady, enduring, shaping the flow long after the surface has changed. And like all great rivers, Rome does not end, it simply becomes part of a greater ocean. So now, as we return to the quiet night that embraces the ruins of the ancient city, imagine standing among them, stone warmed by the day's last light, shadows stretching across broken columns, the Tiber flowing softly nearby. The air is cool. The world is hushed. Time feels suspended. And in that stillness, you can feel the echo of something eternal. Not triumph. Not conquest. But presence. Rome remains not because of its armies, but because of its imagination. Not because of its emperors, but because of its ideas. Not because of its power, but because of its memory. A memory that lives in us. A memory we carry forward. A memory that whispers still. And if you listen closely, very closely, you can hear it even now, drifting through the centuries, carried by wind and stone and breath. Roma Aeterna. Eternal Rome. A city that rose from myth. A people who shaped a world. A dream that refused to die. And as your eyes soften and your mind drifts into quiet, let that whisper rest beside you, the gentle voice of a civilization that shaped humanity, softened by time into something tender, something everlasting, something eternal. And so, beneath the quiet glow of the moon, our journey through the rise, the rain, the fall, and the eternal echo of Rome comes gently to rest. The empire that once shaped continents now drifts like a soft whisper through the corridors of time, no longer a force of power, but a memory that guides the world in quieter ways. Its stones may be broken, its temples worn, yet its spirit moves through our streets, our words, our laws, our dreams. Rome lives not as an empire, but as an idea, carried from one generation to the next, like a small flame passed carefully through the dark. And as you breathe in this final moment, let the story settle beside you. Let the river of history move calmly through the night. Let the echoes of ancient footsteps fade into silence. For Rome never truly ended. It simply changed form, from marble to memory, from empire to eternity. Thank you, for walking with me beneath its timeless light. And if this gentle journey carried you closer to rest, may the whispers of history stay with you wherever your dreams drift tonight. Good night, and until our next story, let the echoes endure.